Hi guys, this is Kendall. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This video is a little bit different than my podcast, but if you guys watch my podcast, you will know that I test knit a pair of socks. And I kind of just want to talk about my experience test knitting for the first time. So, the socks I test knit, were the Meditation socks by Sarah Kay Knits. They're a little stretched out because I've worn both pairs that I made quite a few times, and I haven't washed them since I wore them. So this was my first time test knitting ever at all, and of course it was a pair of socks because it's me. And this is what the pattern is like supposed to look like. The pattern is only supposed to be on the front, not on the back, but with this one I accidentally did it on the back, and it works great either way too. They both work great. They both fit my foot, and they're both absolutely beautiful. I will put up a better picture of these socks, like on my feet. Yeah, that's right, on my feet, like here, so you guys can see. But again, these are the Meditation socks by Sarah Kay Knits. The pattern will be linked in the description, as well as the links to the yarn I used. This is Treasure Goddess's fingering in the color Sandy Beach. And then this is the Little Foxes Encanto Solid Olive Me. It's not, like, the color is not coming up. Like, that's kind of accurate, but it's a little bit lighter. It's some weird, like, there's some weird lighting issues going on because it's, like, overcast and also, like, starting sunset. So the lighting is just a little off. But this is a pretty accurate, like, representation of this yarn. But so I have applied to test knit many times. I had just not been chosen until these socks, which sucks, but that is part of having not test knit before. And this is kind of a bit of a spoiler for a future video I'm going to be doing, but I am creating my own pattern, and the testing is currently going on, and I wanted to make sure I let some people who had never test knit before test knit, because, like, it's such a great experience. Like, it's so great. I can't recommend it more. But I applied. I found out I got accepted into the test knit right after my volunteering. I almost screamed, but I didn't want to scare the kids I was working with, so I didn't. And then I got home and immediately cast on the socks. I finished the first one in like 5 days, and then the second one in like 3 days. The test knit was long. It was a very generous amount of time, which is what I'm doing for my test knit. Just because I want to make sure that everybody has enough time to complete the test knit, and I also don't really, I have a lot going on this month, and so I'm kind of just gonna wait to release the pattern next month. But and so beautiful, loved it. And the group chat I was in was super good, super helpful, really encouraging. Like, when I made the mistake of doing this, not only did Sarah say it was okay, a lot of the other people in the group said it still looked very beautiful and it looked really nice, which really brought me some encouragement, because I had gotten like about to start the heel flap when I realized that it was wrong, and I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna have to rip all the way back. And Sarah was like, no, you don't have to, it's completely fine. So she was so sweet. I totally recommend her. I will be applying for future patterns of hers. I recommend you do as well. And it was an overall fun experience. So some little tips about test knitting and applying to test knit that I want to give you guys as first time or fairly new test knitters. One, I only test knit for projects that I would have wanted to make anyways. So if I see something that has a tester call and I'm like, oh, I don't really like it, it's not really my style, I'm not going to apply. And you probably shouldn't, because, like, if you're not going to wear it, if you're not going to use it, I personally don't see the point. And so I recommend only applying to test knit what you know you would have wanted to knit, regardless of the fact that it's a test knit and you get the pattern for free. If you would have paid money for the pattern, apply to test knit it, is basically what I'm saying. And tip number 2 is to make sure you have enough time to test knit and also do some of your own stuff. This was my main project while I was test knitting because I had just finished like another sock, so like I didn't have anything else on the needles. But like the socks for my pattern that I'm knitting along with my test knitters, I have another pair of socks on, and I knew that would happen, but I knew I would still have enough time to knit the socks even with my busy schedule. And I don't like, if you don't have the time to commit to like making a whole sweater like soon, don't apply for a sweater. If you only have time to commit to like a pair of socks, then just apply to test knit socks. There's plenty of sock designers out there who have testing calls, and I'm actually, once I learn color work, I'm gonna do another one. I'm super excited. And also, I would recommend not test knitting something that has a technique you've never used before. I applied to test the Midnight Sun socks by Northern Knits and Pearls, and I didn't realize there was cables, and I'd never done cables before. And I'm kind of glad I didn't test knit, since my first time cabling wasn't on a test knit, where the pattern designer is really relying on your input to make sure everything goes smoothly and goes okay. I'm still a beginner to cable. I knit 3 socks with cables, well, 3 pairs of socks with cables, but like I know what to do. I know how it works, so like now I would feel comfortable test knitting a sock with cables because I've done them before. I've done a 1x1 cable essentially, and a 2x2 cable, so like I know what I'm doing a little bit. Not perfect, but it's not my first time. And so if there's a technique you've never used before, like lace or cabling or color work, don't apply to test knit. Learn the technique first, and then you can apply to test knit for a greater variety of projects. The only thing I would say is kind of okay to apply to test knit, in my personal opinion, is like patterned socks, like textured socks like this. This has knits, purls, and slip stitches, and so as long as you know all of the techniques involved, and maybe you just haven't used them all together in one sock, go for it. Like, I never used knits, purls, and slip stitches on the leg of a sock, but I'd use them all in a sock at some point or another. And so I was comfortable with the techniques. I was comfortable switching back and forth and getting the things down. But if I would have, like, if this was my first time like knitting socks, or like I'd only ever knit vanilla socks, it would have been a struggle, but I would have been able to do it because most socks do have 1x1 ribbing and a slip stitch heel, so you are kind of comfortable. You're able to do them on the small little needles that socks are usually on, which I find really helps when you already know technique. The third one is to already have yarn in your stash, or like on the way, and you're like, I bought this yarn for a different pattern, but like if I get this test knit pattern, like if I get to test knit this, I'm gonna just use this yarn. But like, don't wait until after you get accepted to the test knit to buy the yarn unless you know you have time. Like if you're test knitting a pair of socks and you really only need to have one sock done for the test knit by the deadline, and I'm gonna just say the test knit is like 30 days and it takes you 15 to knit a pair of socks, to knit a pair of socks. You can buy yarn once you get into the test knit because you know for a fact you'll have enough time to finish the sock that you need, and probably the sock that you don't need. But don't always assume you're going to have enough time, because like if you apply for a sweater pattern, you don't, like, I don't know on average how long it takes me to knit a sweater. A long time. Like, I've never timed myself. And so like if you're applying for a sweater that has a 2-month deadline, and you know it usually takes you like almost 2 months to knit a sweater in the weight that they're working with, I would recommend having the yarn on hand, or like on the way and about to come, like about to arrive. I would also recommend following the designer's instructions for what type of yarn, not like what make it is, like the contents of it, the fiber contents, but like if the pattern says like don't use heavily variegated yarns, don't do it. I did it with my mermaid socks, which I didn't test knit, and the pattern was a little lost. And so if it's like a busy pattern, I would recommend doing like 1 or 2, something simple, not like super variegated like this. Just something like, even like this is okay because it's not super variegated. It's not like all of the colors, it's just different versions of one color, and the pattern is still able to pop, as you can see. And this one is a solid, so I mean, it's a semi-solid. Obviously there's slight variegation because it's hand-dyed, but it's not like, again, it's not like this where it's intentionally a lot of different colors. That is whatever tip it was. I forget what number I was on because I suck at this thing. Also, make sure you like enjoy knitting the item. Like, if this kind of ties in with the first one, if you know, like, hey, I'm mainly a sock knitter, I don't really love knitting shawls, I personally wouldn't apply to test knit a shawl unless you're absolutely in love with it. Like, if you're mainly like a sweater knitter and you sometimes knit socks, but you fell in love with the socks that you saw the tester call for, go ahead. But if you're like, you know, it's socks, not my favorite, don't apply, because you're not going to have the same, not drive, you're not going to have the same love for the process if you don't like the process when you're not on a time crunch. And I think that's just about all for all of my tips and my experience as a first time test knitter. Please check out Sarah's pattern. She is so sweet. She deserves all of the love in the world. And again, I will link these 2 yarns in the description, and as well as the pattern and her Ravelry and her Instagram, not her Ravelry. But I will see you guys whenever I see you. Don't know when that's gonna be, but see you then.